wire and distribution wire. Service wire is the wire from the main breaker at the top of the electric panel out and away from you. From the main breaker, connecting it to the meter, from the meter connecting it to the transformer or post or whatever, and from there to the plant. All that's aluminum. You would have twice as many power poles as you went down the side of the highway if we used copper for everything. That's obviously none of your business. What we're talking about is the house. By law, you can't have distribution into the house after 1976 that is aluminum. It has to be copper. Now, why was aluminum a problem? Why is aluminum outlawed? There's some problems with just the way aluminum ages that cause the heat problems and the fire problems that we had in the early 70s. All metal rusts, particularly in a humid environment like we live in. Copper oxide, copper rust, is a conductor. So a rusted copper connection will continue to do its job without a problem. Aluminum oxide is a resistor. So it will obviously resist. Resistance is heat. Heat is fire with electricity. The other problem with aluminum, and I forget the chemical term for it, but aluminum, like glass, flows under gravity. A house like mine, one of the reasons the windows get brittle over age is because the glass chemically or microscopically flows to the bottom of the pane incredibly slowly. So my house is 30 some odd years old, 38 years old. My window pane will be microscopically wider at the bottom than it is at the top. Same thing happens with aluminum. You dog down an aluminum wire, the aluminum not only tightens, but it flows away from the pressure. So it can actually thin it out and separate itself. Then you get the risk of an arc. So in the end, aluminum wire around a house, when you have cheaper connections at outlets and switches, that's where you're going to get the heat from resistance and the potential to cut the wire with flow pressure. In the end, in 1976, the legislature said no mas, no more aluminum in a house. In various other states, it happened about the same time.
76.
Right, 1976. Now you look at a house built before 1966, and you don't see any aluminum. Everything's copper. Why did we go from copper to aluminum and then have to go away from it? What happened between 1966 and 1976? The Vietnam War in South America went to hell in a handbasket. Where's all of your copper from? Chile and Peru and Ecuador, which were melting down, and then the military-industrial complex was chewing through copper like it was no tomorrow. So aluminum became an inexpensive option, and we discovered why our forebears had never liked aluminum much. So it is one of those things that, one of the lessons I take away from that is I'm also a little slow to embrace newer products. You guys have seen PEX plumbing pipes in houses, the flexible red and blue pipes. I watched that for a good 10 years before I became comfortable with it. You just have to be a little careful about new things. Got to be careful. I don't want to say that I don't like new stuff. There are some really cool things that they're doing today in construction that are pretty nice, but then there are other things that don't work half as well as they think they're going to. The exhaust fans. For anybody have a house that's got the booster fan on your dryer? If dryer can only kick about 35 feet. So for a while in the late 90s, through about 2008, they were putting booster fans. Then about 2008, they decided, you know what, the booster fan stops working because it's in an attic and it gets hot, and then it becomes a dam in the system and backs up lint and becomes a bigger fire hazard than we were trying to avoid to begin with. So booster fans came into the market and within 10 years are out of the market, and then what they're doing when they come up out of the floor with the 4-inch line going into the wall and up the wall, as soon as they come out of the floor in the attic, they go to a 6-inch because that increases the throughput. Way to solve the problem without having to have the fan. And don't get me started on swimming pools, fiber optic lights, salt systems, in pool, the pop-up brush system that kind of blows everything towards. Those are all new ideas that have all not panned out and become bigger problems. Salt is a nightmare.
We had it.
Yeah, and you took it out, right?
We stopped using it, and then when we sold the house, the buyer wanted salt. We had to put a whole new thing in just to sell the house.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was too hard to keep balanced, whatever,
Yeah.
like chemically in our climate.
Yeah, it is. Salt, it's a poor idea. But that's a great example of anytime somebody comes up with a new idea, I'm always just real careful about trusting until I've seen it demonstrated, and the people who are really good in that industry actually say good things about it. You know, you talk to any good pool repair guy and ask him about a salt system, and they will usually start cussing or talking about expenses. Now, the pool builders want to sell them to you a lot of times because it's more money. But really, the good pool guys, if you demand one, will make you sign a waiver that they're not going to warrant it.
Do you have a good pool company?
For repairs?
Repairs and stuff that you would recommend?
I still like Lyle over at PhD and Alvin at Executive. And they're both on our referral link on our website.
Are you on referral link?
Yeah, if you go to the referral link on the Texas Inspection Partners. Sprinklers should be PVBs and rain sensors. Sprinkler systems, those guys were not licensed. There was no such thing as a licensed irrigation guy till 2008. They didn't have a standard of practice till 2010. So there's a real difference in quality of install in about 2010. But to boil it all down on the licensed irrigation rules that really apply to us, they're not allowed to water the house. They're not allowed to water the flat work. They're not allowed to shoot over the flat work. So for arranging sprinklers, they have to be careful at what they're doing when they're aiming sprinklers. When you've got an 80-foot side of a house and they've got all these sprayers that are shooting away from the house, you know, they've got to make sure those things aren't turned off angle so they're spraying the house. 4 feet out from the sprinkler, it's turned enough to where it's shooting right into the house. They're not supposed to do that. They're not supposed to water the driveway or the sidewalk because it's not going to grow. It's a waste of water. From the TRCC, Texas Commission on Natural Resources, licenses those guys. What they care about is a waste of resources. What I care about is I don't want sprinklers shooting in weep holes and doing damage. I've found many a house with damaged flooring because of sprinklers shooting in weep holes. So we do not want that to happen. Also, if you have a strip of grass, then a sidewalk, then the front yard, you cannot do the strip of grass between the sidewalk and the street by shooting over the sidewalk to water it. It has to have its own sprinklers. And then any new controller after 2010, you have to put a rain sensor on it. So you have to have the rain sensor on there. Also, I'm sorry?
PVB, what does that mean?
Plumbing vacuum breaker. All sprinkler systems have to have that bulbous PVB that basically the water goes out to the sprinkler system, can't come back. Yes, it has to be above the closest water device, which means hose bib on the side of the house. So in your house, you got this ugly ass PVB zip tied to the side of your house that's about that tall, right? Somewhere. Your husband knows where it is, probably. That's where it has to be. Oops, sorry. That's where it has to be. It has to be high. And the reason the reason it's a problem is because old school, they would put them in boxes in the ground. And you can't do that. And I'm about to wear out my welcome, so let me go through the last couple of slides. I got ahead of myself and talked about this. The key with the report is we still have specified cover sheet administrative, fonts, paragraph organizations, and the checkbox organization on the left. But really beyond that, we can put anything we want to. So what I encourage you to do is demand inspectors be responsive to you in a useful report format. I'm sure that if you ask Kathy or if you guys ask Joe and Christina, they would be able to show you a 70-page report that made them want to pull their hair out. And they could show you my report or Mike Weibel's report. well-written reports that are easy to understand and find the meat. So if you get a report that's 50 pages long, I tell realtors this all the time. Send it back to the inspector and say, this is crap. Where's the meat? If you ever want to hear from me or my clients again, find a format that is readable where I can find what the hell you want me to know. And if they get uppity and say, it is what it is, that's the way I write my reports, say, don't let the door hit you in the ass on the way out. I mean, you guys have an enormous amount of power to train home inspectors who haven't figured out that in the end we're in the communication business. I can find all the errors in the world, but if I can't effectively communicate that to you and your buyer, what good am I? All right, so how do we separate the top inspectors? Don't rely on a low license number, says a guy who's in the top 20% of all license numbers. Just because my license number is 3772 doesn't mean that I'm a great home inspector. Anybody with a license number less than 2,000 is from the origination of the License Act, so they've been around 30 years or more. In the last few years, we're actually into 5 digits now, so you'll find license numbers out there with 10,314. There's some good guys out there who were builders, who might have a very high 8,000 license number. When I first started out, it really frustrated me to no end how many people wouldn't want to talk to me because my license number started with a 3 instead of with a 2 or a 1. And I'm here to tell you that just because they got a low license number doesn't mean that they have communicated very well. There's a famous story from Lyndon Johnson when he was hiring somebody in the White House, he hired the guy who had less experience. And the guy who had 20 years more experience came to him and said, what did I do wrong? Why did you not hire me and you hired that guy who's only got 1 year experience? And Lyndon Johnson looked at him and said, he has more experience than you do. No, I've been there 20, no, you've had 1 year experience 20 times. He knew the guy well enough to know that just because he'd been drawing oxygen and doing the job didn't mean he was converting that information to really having experience. So I'm here to tell you there are good guys who have license numbers lower than mine who I wouldn't let do my doghouse, and there are young guys who would be fantastic home inspectors. So give everybody a shot. Don't just read on license number. Look for the indicators of quality. Communication skills. I know I'm wearing out my welcome here, but I like to think that I'm pretty good at explaining in writing and orally what I'm talking about. And communication skills is different than people skills because there are people who can discuss it technically, orally and in writing, but when they're getting signals, nonverbal signals, that somebody has a problem with something, has a concern with something, totally misses it. And that's key. Like I said earlier, when somebody asks or expresses concern or keeps staring at something, that's when I will say, have we had some previous problems? Do we have an issue? What's the concern? As diplomatically as I can, but it helps us to communicate the way they receive. Doesn't do me any good to be a good communicator unless I can communicate it in a way that you can receive, you understand. And I'm here to tell you there are a lot of guys who are, as we used to say in the military, they're always in the send mode, never in the receive mode. And you have to be able to pull both of them off to be able to actually communicate. And then business skills, which is something nobody spends any time teaching a home inspector. You guys take courses on sales and marketing and customer client handling and how to negotiations and all that fun stuff. We don't do any of that. I taught a class at Champions for a while on this, and it was a very popular class because, and I don't know if Champions teaches it to anybody now, but a good home inspector has to know his place in the overall puzzle. I have a lot of frustration with guys who act like you don't exist, or that they don't have to care what your concerns are. Which is not me saying that I care when I shouldn't. I have had realtor tell me, look, you can't find anything wrong with this house. There's just no room for negotiation. That's a great example of when I don't care. You can say that all you want to, but should I pay any attention to that? No. It is what it is. On the other hand,
I always say it's your job to find something wrong.
yeah, well, I mean, it's my job to find what's wrong, is the way I would change it.
Yeah.
But yeah, and to be polite about it, but to understand what your needs are specific to this house and this client, because some clients are easier to deal with than others, and the client's situation and the seller's situation. But in the end, my loyalty is to the truth. But I've got to understand what my piece is in the overall puzzle, and then support other professionals. There's a time and a place to bite my tongue, and there's a time and a place to stop in the middle of Bissonnette when the agent says you can't find anything wrong and say, are you kidding? Do you know you're not allowed to say that? Do you know why you're not allowed to say that? I've done that. The main thing I think I want you to do is to watch home inspectors, and for the true new agents, you really should go to a home inspection and hang out for an hour or so. Now, yes, I did say that you don't have to go. It's a terrible use of your time. Not right now, it's not. It's educational. It's a terrible use of Kathy's time.
But I would even like to redo it now because
Every once in a while, yeah.
yeah, I mean, still things come up, and I'm like, I don't know what that is, or I don't know how to help the buyer or seller respond.
Otherwise, when something new like arc faults come out, you don't know how to deal with it.
Right,
Yeah.
and I always say, please go and listen to the inspector, and he'll help explain it to you when he finds it, and it will help us decide whether or not it's important or not. So
And-
it's time for me to go watch an
Yeah.
inspection again.
And then you guys have to go to learn. Now, it might not be the best use of your time that day, so don't feel bad if I'm going to be there for 3 hours and you can only come for an hour. That gives you some opportunity to watch the inspector and look for those indicators that indicate to you whether or not he's competent and an effective communicator, or there are some questions about those areas that you have. And the only way you're ever going to get comfortable with your list of go-to people is to actually observe them in their natural environment and see how they behave and see whether or not they can do their job effectively. So, I always talk about process because to me that's incredibly important. I always tell my guys that I hire and guys that I train, I don't care what your process is, I just care that you have a process. I'll give you a good example. A guy used to work for us until he was a fireman. Now he's on the arson squad for Houston, so he doesn't do home inspections anymore. But he always went in the home, and I don't know which way firemen go, I don't remember. They always go left or they always go right, but every fireman in the world would know the answer to this question. They all do the same thing, to clear a house. So that's how he does home inspections. I think that's crazy. Because what if, I mean, he will literally hit kitchens, then go a bathroom, then a room, then a bathroom. To me, that's disorganized. My head doesn't work that way. His head works that way. Excellent home inspector. I'm a systems guy. I go set up in the kitchen. I do the exterior, first pass, first floor, exterior second pass if there is one, third pass looking at the roof. So I've made 3 laps around the house. Then I come and do the garage and all its systems. Then I do the kitchen and all its systems. And then I do all the bathrooms. While I'm doing that, I do the air. Then I do all the interiors. While I'm doing that, I'm doing the heat. Then I do the attic, and then I'm done. And I do every house that way. And if you try to make me change, it drives me crazy. I don't care if somebody does a different way. I care that they do it the same way every time. So when you're watching home inspectors, try to, with one home inspector, show up at the same point a couple of times and see if he's doing something different every time you show up at the beginning. Huge red flag, because if I get off course, what's the chance I'm going to miss something important that gets us all sued? So the only time I ever break process is if you tell me that you've got to put a 1-year-old down for a nap. I will do that room, ask you to close the door, and then I'll do everything else in the normal order and skip that room when I get to interiors. And that's about the only time I ever change process. And I politely tell the seller that, yes, I know you want me to do the outside first and then go I'm sorry, inside first and then go outside because it's muddy. But I have mud boots in my truck and surgical shoe covers for my shoes, and this ain't my first rodeo, and I have to type in between every area. I type and update so that when I'm done I can actually walk you through the pictures on a computer screen. So no, I'm not doing the inside first and then the outside just because you're worried about me draping mud on the house. And that, I know that seems pushy, but it really isn't my first rodeo. I haven't paid to clean a carpet in 19 years because I learned my lesson. I'm hard-headed. I'm a slow learner, but I'm a learner. If you have a process, you get a consistent inspection, and that is so key. Consistent depth, consistent accuracy. Other quality clues. It may seem just that I'm chatty when I ask where you're from, what are you doing, because that's really, people will not say to me, oh, by the way, I'm from basement land, I've never had a slab house before, I need you to explain that to me. So I ask, where are you moving from? How old are your kids? There's safety issues with a 2-year-old that are different than I have because I'm an empty nester. I'm in control. It's my inspection. I'm going to drag your client around. You do not go to the doctor's office and tell the doctor what to do first. I'm constantly amazed at the number of your buyers who will say, well, let's go over here and look at this. Let's go over here and look at that. Once again, they're getting me off my process. So I very politely explain to them, you can ask me whatever question you have, whenever you have it, because I don't want you to forget about it, and I'll make a note of it, but we're going to do the house in a very specific order because that's how I organize to do things as well as I can. And everybody goes, oh, okay, and off we go. I speak plain English. We can give improvement recommendations and we can ballpark costs, but like I said, is my recommendation chiseled in granite and handed down on Mount Sinai? No. The handyman remodeler may come out and say, oh, no, we're not going to do that, we're going to do this. I'm not the handyman remodeler. Don't like jargon. If I have to deliver bad news, I will try one of the lessons I learned in the military. Before you tell somebody that they suck at their job, tell them something they're good at. Makes it a lot easier to tell them they suck at their job, or they sucked today. Basic counseling 101. So before I tell them that we're going to have to recommend an engineer, I will find something about the house to compliment. And you'd be amazed how much easier that makes it to swallow the fact that just because I'm recommending an engineer doesn't mean that they need to run from the house. There's great aspects to this house, but there's this unknown that we have to deal with. It's fixable. It's no big deal, but it needs to be dealt with. So you wrap those kinds of things properly, makes all the difference in the world. What you don't want is you don't want that guy who comes up and walks up to the front door, like the guy who trained me, looks at something and goes, oh shit. That's exact quote, talking about a roof. It's a roof, we can fix it. It's the old joke that I used to use, and people just don't get this anymore, is the only thing we can't fix is if I park a D40 on your slab. Now that's a cat bulldozer that weighs about 40 tons. Everything else we can fix, and it's true. So there's absolutely no reason to lose your perspective and dwell on the bad. In the end, absolute pet peeve of mine, make sure the buyer understands what actions they need to take and the implications of anything that was found. Absolute biggest pet peeve I have is the home inspector who comes out, and this is going to happen to you if it hasn't happened to Kathy, I'll be surprised. Oh, it's great. This is fine. Yes, this little thing. Oh, that little thing. Oh, it's great. No big problem. See you later. Bye-bye. Report comes out. This is screwed up. That's screwed up. This is screwed up. God, get an engineer. Get an electrician. Get a plumber. The report doesn't match the experience. He actually didn't have the balls to say, you need an engineer and you need an electrician. So he did it in writing while he said on site, oh, it's fine. Right? It happens. I can't stand guys like that. If I think you need an engineer, electrician, or a plumber, I'm going to stand in front of the item, look at it and say, this is why you need this guy, so that everybody understands. And once again, goes down, those kind of bitter pills go down a lot easier when somebody is calm about it. Inspector no-nos. I'm not the electrician. I'm also not the real estate agent. I get this question once a week. So is it really worth $160,000? And they always lower their voice when they do it. Even when you guys aren't there, which is the funny part. And, you know, I have a nice little standard line for, you know, I'm not in the market, so I really haven't paid attention in a while, but, you know, that's not really what I do. So, if you don't know, don't answer a question you don't know anything about. Now, why in the hell would I argue with somebody on a job site? Sellers. Sellers. The seller who hears you say something and says, no, that's not right. My repair guy said such and such. So if you have a defensive seller, if you're a listing agent, you have a defensive seller, I don't mind if sellers, buyers, agents, I don't mind who's there. Unless somebody's a pain in the butt. You know the seller better than I do. If the seller has tried to coach you how to do your job, what do you think he's going to do to me? And I have literally twice packed my bag and left a home inspection because of a seller. And I have 3 times packed my bag and left my inspection because of a buyer. So, you know, I'm the licensed inspector and people don't get to tell me how to do my job. And if they won't calm down about it, in 10,000 home inspections, I've walked out 5 times. It's been a while though. And like I said, I haven't paid to clean a carpet in a long time. The only time I worry about is when the buyer shows up with their 3-year-old. So not a great place for kids. There used to be that place over in Panther Creek where you could do drop-in. I don't know what you guys do now. Is that place by H-E-B Market Street still there? That's gone too?
It's gone too.
There used to be an hourly drop-in place for the people who were flying down here, had a weekend.
Yeah.
No. Why would you bring your kids for that? But if you don't have anywhere else to put them. So it sucks, but sometimes only one spouse can come because the other one's got to keep track of the kids. But I routinely have both spouses show up with 3 kids under 5. And I'm way too nice to say, are you kidding? So I will tolerate them for what should be 3 hours, but will almost always end up being 4.5. So that's my problem with kids, is because mom and dad can't focus with Junior there, because Junior wants to play with all the toys.
So
Oh my God.
hours, they're going.
Yeah, they're going to melt down. Their patience meter is going to be pegged. And I think that's it. Yeah, there's a summary at the end, but that doesn't really matter. I apologize for taking this much time. I really thought I would be done 30 minutes ago. But that's pretty much that. Yes, I have to get them out of my truck, sorry.
Okay.
There's a couple right there.
And what do you ever go out, like if we just have, like we're on this listing and there is a leak in the ceiling in the kitchen, no idea where that's coming from.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so I don't know whether or not you should call a roofer
Yeah,
or the
yeah.
AC guy or whomever. Do you come out?
No, if you don't mind me doing it as convenient for me, I can't tell you how many times I've gone out and looked at something real quick for a former client or real estate agent.
Yeah.
We do it all the time. You just have to call me. Mandy is my secretary, and she is trained to say, that'll be $150. That's the minimum she opens her mouth for, because that's my reinspection fee. So call me. That's why my cell phone number's on there. And we won't tell Mandy, and I'll come after the inspection. And I know this is recorded, so don't ever show this to Mandy. She knows I do it. The other thing is gas appliances. When I did a house in Fox Run last week, the appliances couldn't be inspected because they were all gas, and the gas utility was off, and it came as a surprise to everybody, yada, yada, yada. So I did the inspection on Monday, and Saturday I went back out and did the gas appliances, and I didn't charge. It's not would I like to charge? Oh yeah, I'd love to charge the seller for that. But they refuse to pay. So what do you do when the seller refuses to pay? Charge the buyer? It's not the buyer's fault. Every great once in a while I get paid for that by the listing agent when the listing agent feels bad about it. but about half the time, it's not their fault. I won't even let them pay. Jackie Kilgore tried to pay me for a reinspection week before last, and it was the builder's fault. It wasn't her fault. It was the builder's fault. I still have not had Mandy call her and get payment. I'm not gonna even tell Mandy about it. It's not worth it. Goodwill is worth more than $150. Any questions at all? My cell phone number's on there for a reason. Call me, particularly if you have a little issue interpreting somebody else's. I get a lot of those phone calls. I have come in here and sat down with a real estate agent and gone through to scan through somebody else's report to help you understand what the hell they're talking about.